Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After you through the news you need to know about, we run through the fan connect where we answer fans' questions. Bunch of news, bunch of really positive news, which I'm excited to talk about. I don't know if we ran through this on last week, so we'll get this out of the way really quick. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins activate left tackle Teron Armstead from PUP list. I'm sure we covered that last week, but ever since he became a Dolphin, they've been very careful with him. He's also said in press conferences his goal this year is to play every single game in the regular season. I hope that's a realistic number, and if the trade-off is him not practicing as much, it kind of sucks. Hopefully he gets a lot of at least some work in the joint practices with Atlanta, because obviously we won't be able to gauge, what does the offensive line actually look like until the regular season, which isn't always great. But yeah, they've always been careful with him ever since he became a Dolphin. He rarely practices. He's rarely done anything in training camp, even going back to last year. And one interesting thing before we move on, Teron Armstead also said in his press conference that he was a little frustrated with that, of how slow and things have gone for him, or how slow the plan has been for him, keeping him healthy. So, it's good that he's back, but I don't expect anybody to... I mean, he didn't even play in, Saturday's scrimmage. So, yeah, they've been really, really careful with him. This next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins view Dalvin Cook as a luxury. If you're not familiar with what has happened, Chris Greer did a SiriusXM interview. This is what he had to say about Dalvin Cook. He said, quote, "Dalvin is a tremendous athlete and football player and has been productive in this league. That's why everyone is looking at him. People would love to have him. Whether it works out with us or anyone, we're just happy with the group that we have, and we're moving forward with that group." Really weird quote. Since this quote has been said, a lot of players, including Tyreek Hill on, I don't know, maybe it was NFL Network, trying to recruit him to come to Miami. A lot of weird things have happened with him ever since he visited with the Jets. It seems that those two parties aren't going to come together on something, at least as of right now. There's also rumors that the Jets are interested in Ezekiel Elliott. And the rumor on the street, at least if you guys have been reading some of the articles concerning Dalvin Cook and the Jets, it seems that they're not on the same page in terms of snaps with him and Breece Hall and the way that they're going to use him. And then you'll read other articles where they're like, Dalvin Cook wants to be a Jet. So I really don't... It's weird. There's a lot of conflicting information out there. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like anything is going to happen anytime soon. Which has been the case ever since we've been covering it, since it's been happening. This next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. The Dolphins have... we'll start with this first, because we've been talking about this as well. Plus, it's not that big of a deal. This comes from Pro Football Rumors as well. Dolphins defensive tackle Christian Wilkins on extension talks. Speaking to the media, if you guys watched the press conference, he declined to provide an update on the progress of the negotiations. He did say, however, quote, this is what Christian said, "I definitely feel like I've done enough and done a lot to earn a new deal and a new contract. But again, I'm just focusing on ball and improving every day and just giving my all to this organization. And hopefully they'll give their all back to me." I doubt that he'll not be a Dolphin in the future. I highly, highly doubt that, especially since Chris Greer values that position the way he does. Honestly, I don't know what the holdup is. The defensive tackle market this year is kind of insane. A lot of them have gotten extensions, like most of them have. I think the only one that didn't is Ed Oliver, and who is a worse player than Christian Wilkins, by the way. And I actually think he's better than Dexter Lawrence. I think, God bless Dexter Lawrence, but I'd rather have Christian Wilkins. So it's going to be interesting to see what his extension looks like. He deserves it. He's a fan favorite. Everybody loves him. The man's still going to training camp. There's a lot of players around the league right now that are holding out. Obviously, he chose not to do that. And Vic Fangio hasn't had nothing but great things to say about him since he's gotten here. By all accounts and all reports, which we're about to get into, Omar Kelly did his top performers of training camp so far. Christian Wilkins was number one. And again, by all accounts, every beat writer has said the same thing about him, how great of an offseason he's had so far. So I don't know if the deal, I don't know. It'll be interesting. Maybe he gets a deal done by week 1. I don't remember when Emmanuel Ogba's deal got done, but I could be wrong about this, but it felt like it was closer to the season. But I cannot remember that far back. But it's going to be interesting to see how Chris manages the salary cap. He has a lot of young players on the team. It's very flexible, though. and as people have pointed out, an extension with Christian Wilkins would actually relieve some salary cap. This next news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Again, the Dolphins have signed some mid-level guys. They signed the former Detroit Lion Deshaun Hand and the former Jet, cornerback Perry Nickerson. I don't really have anything else to say on this matter. It adds some corner depth that they needed for Perry, especially for some of these preseason games. I don't expect him to do anything. And Deshaun Hand is interesting, but Vic did say in his press conference that he is looking for that 5th to 6th defensive lineman. So maybe, I don't know. But I feel like they're pretty deep at that position. So it's not too much of a I don't know. It's not a big deal. That's basically what I'm trying to say. I don't know why I just blanked out. This next news story comes from Sports Illustrated. This is the scrimmage observations that Saturday's practice. Obviously, they had a scrimmage. These are some of the things that happened in it. Again, this comes from Sports Illustrated. Cam Smith returns. If you're not familiar, I don't know if we covered this last week, but Cam Smith did leave with an injury in one of the previous practices. He did come back for Saturday, which is awesome. Like I pointed out, Armstead did not participate in Saturday's scrimmage. Another notable thing, it's kind of small, Jeff Wilson did go to the locker room, and he did come back. He taped together his fingers. Kind of nonsense. Nobody really needed to know that. If you guys haven't seen, there is a video on YouTube. You can actually watch this play. Tyreek Hill had, I believe, a 58-yard touchdown on a post. The defense played zero coverage, and Tyreek Hill beat him deep on a really pretty fat. I mean, you don't really see Vic Fangio play zero coverage, but he beat him deep. There was nobody in the middle of the field. You guys can look the play up if you want to. It was a beautiful throw by Tua and ended up being a pretty long touchdown. Some of the other noteworthy plays is that Noah Igbinoghene had an interception against Tua. I'm not going to say anything about him until we actually see him play at somewhat of a high level. I do think that with us running more of a zone scheme, that fits him way more than what we were doing before. And maybe he can take advantage of that. Xavier Howard locked up Robbie Anderson, which I think that's kind of an interesting thing to put on here. The defense dominated again. If you guys have been following training camp so far, the defense has had a really good offseason so far. And the offense has had some really good practices as well. But it seems that the defense is playing at a very high level ever since Vic got here, more than usual. It's not even people like Omar Kelly are raving about it. So, yeah, that's really it. There wasn't anything else that happened. There's some other things that I want to discuss that happened on Saturday, but which leads me to the next thing we're going to talk about. These are the top 10 performers of training camp so far. This comes from Sports Illustrated. This is by Omar Kelly, who's been covering the Dolphins for a very long time. If you're not familiar, I'm sure everybody who's listening to this is familiar with his work. But obviously, a very cynical man, not a very, very he has to see it first, and even when sometimes I feel like he kind of, I don't know. So I think he can be a little bit too cynical sometimes. But let's get into this. I always do love his art. He's probably the best writer out of all of the beat writers for the Dolphins, and he doesn't. You can always really trust what he says. I would say he's the most trustworthy Dolphins reporter. His number one performer of training camp so far is defensive tackle Christian Wilkins. This is what he had to say about Wilkins' performance in training camp so far. Wilkins has improved every year of his NFL career, and it seems he's turned up the volume on what he achieved last year. A season when he set franchise records for tackles from a defensive lineman, Wilkins has either become a pass-rushing force or Miami Dolphins' offensive guard play is a major problem. We'll be able to identify the right answer to the riddle during this week's joint practices against the Atlanta Falcons, where Wilkins and his unit will be facing off against a first-year starting quarterback, Desmond Ridder, and one of the best run-blocking O-lines in the league. See, that's what Chris Wilkins has been dominating, but he wants to see it against a really good offensive line in the Atlanta Falcons, which I think I'm really looking forward to how well that defense performs against that offense because of the hype that's been going on with them. It gets me really excited. So I'm very excited for those joint practices. But again, the number one performer, according to Omar Kelly so far, Christian Wilkins. Number two performer in training camp so far might surprise some people. Tua, which I don't think a quarterback, maybe Tannehill in 2016, made a top 10 Omar Kelly list for top performers. Maybe. This is what he had to say about Tua's training camp so far. The bar has been raised. When you're the NFL's top-rated quarterback from 2022 and you're playing in that same offense for the first time since high school, the expectation is that you turn up the volume on your execution. And Tagovailoa has. He routinely completes deep balls, consistently converts third downs, and often throws touchdown passes when Miami is doing red zone work. While Saturday's scrimmage was an offensive embarrassment, it was good to see Tagovailoa huddle up his unit to give them an emotionally charged speech. The Dolphins are Tua's team, and he's finally acting like it, taking the reins. Which is what I wanted to mention about Saturday's practice. I'm glad that Tua expects more from the team and feels more comfortable doing that. I think that's a really, really big deal, and him becoming the leader and the franchise quarterback that we need him to. But everything else, I think that surprises people that Tua is having such a good offseason so far. Omar's not the only one to say that. There's been multiple other reporters, if you guys been following the tweets and stuff like that have backed this up. And Omar to give this kind of props out is not normal. The fact that he is consistently, doing well on third down and doing well in the red zone, despite the fact that the defense is playing really, really good football. And I think that's a big deal. So it's good to see that Tua is playing really, really good. The number three, the third best performer in training camp so far is fullback Alec Ingold. Sorry, guys, I have something in my throat. This is what Omar had to say about Alec Ingold. It has been pleasantly surprising how effective Ingold has been in all the packages he's featured in. He's a forceful short yardage runner, a reliable pass blocker, and dangerous pass catcher. Ingold can serve as an inline blocker, which hints he could inherit snaps as Miami's second tight end. Ingold's impact has been one of camp's most pleasant surprises. The thing that I want to kind of highlight of what Omar has seen from Alec is two things. Two things in being his inline blocking is really good, and his run after the catch what did he say exactly? He's a forceful short yardage runner, which is what this team needs. And if he can kind of take the role of being, hey, this guy is a fullback, but he's kind of a tight end too, kind of that kind of that Kyle Juszczyk role with Kyle Shanahan, and how they've, the Shanahan's offenses have always had good fullbacks and have been productive in that way. So if Alec can be above average and be kind of like, maybe get to, or at least get a little bit close to Kyle Juszczyk's level, and really pick up the slack from the tight end room, because by all accounts, at least so far, the tight ends have been bad and pretty much non-existent since training camp started. So hopefully Alec can come in and pick up the slack from that room. But it's nice. I mean, the fact that he's 3 on here is a big deal, and on a loaded Dolphins roster. And he's put him above some really good players. So I just hope he can kind of pick up the slack from the tight ends. Number 4 on Omar Kelly's top performers of training camp so far list is Jalen Waddle. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scratch that thing. This is what Omar had to say about Jalen Waddle. Waddle, who led the NFL in yards per reception, 18 last season, and produced back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons, appears to have picked up where he left off. Waddle has been Cam's most consistent playmaker. He seemingly developed a chemistry with Tua that requires little communication. The only knock on Waddle's game is the drops he commits from time to time, which has been somewhat of an issue with him towards the end of last year, really only in one game. I'm trying to think of like another like massive drop. He really doesn't have any other than the last Buffalo game in the playoffs. Maybe I'm forgetting some, but it seems since that game that he's had some issues with that in practices. So hopefully he can kind of get over that hump. But Waddle, I think, is a fan favorite for good reason. He's a great player. The 5th best performer since training camp started is defensive tackle Zach Sieler. Interesting to see him on here this high. On any other team, Sieler would be the top standout on a good defensive line. But when you're playing next to Wilkins, who has regularly dominated practices, you become a supporting actor to the studio's biggest star. Based on how Wilkins and Sieler have practiced together, either the Dolphins have a forceful defensive tackle duo, or Miami needs to patch up the interior of its offensive line. We'll gain clarity on that when the Falcons come to town for this week's joint practices. Since Sieler and Wilkins have teamed up all the way back in like 2019, they've been awesome. I remember the game that we had against Cincinnati, which we ended up winning in overtime. Is another game that comes to mind. They've literally, I swear to God, even last year, this past season, it seemed like they made a big play in every game. I mean, even in the playoff game and in the Saturday night game against Buffalo, they made huge plays in those games. They're a phenomenal tandem. I honestly, other than maybe like Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, they gotta be like top 3 in the league. Like, unless I'm forgetting something, but they play so well together, and they bring great energy to the team. And it's good that Zach is playing well in Vic's defense, because that was one of the things I was wondering. It's nice to see that he's playing good football. The 6th best performer so far in training camp is Bradley Chubb. Chubb, who has contributed, this is what Omar had to say about Bradley Chubb. Chubb, who has contributed 28.5 sacks and forced 7 fumbles in the 57 games he's played the past 5 seasons, has returned to a defense and a scheme that allowed him to thrive in Denver. In Fangio's scheme, he has the freedom to do whatever he wants as long as he makes a play, and we're starting to see him play faster and play more physical. He also won multiple top practice performances. So, this is a great fit. Him going back to the defense that made him so successful in the first place. And the freedom, obviously, that Omar's talked about that he has in the scheme. And obviously Vic is very familiar with him. But he's had a lot of success in this defense. So, this might be... other than, again, the 49ers defense that Vic had early on in the 2010s was amazing. But this is close to that. They just have to perform. And the edges for this defense has the potential to be just as good as those 49ers fronts that he had with Justin Smith, Aldon Smith in his prime before the alcohol issues. And then they had Ahmad Brooks as well. But this defense, I think, can replicate some of that. And Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, very, very excited to see what they do in a competent defensive scheme. The 7th best performer in training camp so far is wide receiver Tyreek Hill. This is what Omar had to say. He said Hill had a very rough first week, but regained his swagger in the practices that followed. Understand that the standards for Hill, who is the most dynamic player I've ever seen on a football field, are high. Any practice where he's not delivering at least 60 yards of offensive production is a bad day. However, this doesn't look like a talent who can deliver a 2,000-yard season. If Hill truly did freestyle his way to 1,700 yards last year, I'd suggest he get back to doing that. Harsh words from Omar. I don't really have anything to add on to that. I think that's been pretty much a consensus, is that Tyreek Hill hasn't had as good of a camp as he did this past offseason for whatever reason. But I don't think that matters. I think he'll be just fine. The 8th best performer in training camp so far is cornerback Xavier Howard. This is what Omar had to say about Howard. Howard, a 4-time Pro Bowl selection, is grandfathered onto this list because it's a blessing that he's even gracing the practice field so early in camp. That hasn't been Howard's routine in past years, but he's doing everything he can to send a message to the younger players and get himself ready for the regular season. He spent nearly 70% of his snaps covering Hill, and you know what they say, iron sharpens iron. This week's joint practices against the Falcons should provide Howard the work he needs to get ready for the start of the regular season. Doesn't really surprise me that X is on this list. Like Omar said, he normally doesn't practice that much. But I think since everybody kind of perceived his year last year as a bad one, I think you can kind of see that X wants to play better this year. Even though it wasn't his fault. Obviously dealt with the groin injury, and Josh Boyer's defense is just... If you're a corner in Josh Boyer's defense, it's not fun. The 9th best performer since training camp started is a blessing that he's even on the team, is cornerback Cam Smith, which is a big deal, obviously with the Jalen Ramsey injury. The Dolphins' 2023 second-round pick generally recovers his receiver tightly and is good for one pass breakup per day. He's clearly headed in the right direction and will be in the mix to start on the boundary opposite Howard if he stays healthy. When he masters the defense and adjusts to the speed of the NFL in the 3 preseason games, I'm putting Smith ahead of Kader Kohou among the top camp standouts because Kohou has a tendency to hold, which is something he needs to clean up. So, obviously, it's nice to know that he's on this list and hasn't even really scratched the surface. Even though the thing I will say, pushing back on Cam Smith being on this list, is that Kader Kohou has also had a very, very good camp so far, by all accounts. So, other than, I guess, Omar. But, I guess, which Cam Smith has also had a great camp so far. So, I wouldn't say that's a kind of a knock against Kader. He did have some holds last year, but I don't know. I don't think he has a holding issue. He's not, I don't think he has a problem with that anyway. But anyway, it's nice to see Cam Smith on this list, the only rookie to make this list, and we need him to play well while Jalen is hurt. Number 10, the 10th best performer since training camp started, according to Omar, is Kendall Lamb, which I don't think any of you would have expected me to say. And when I read this list for the first time, I was like, I cannot believe Kendall Lamb made the list. But obviously, Kendall, if you're not familiar, plays left tackle, or offensive tackle, kind of plays both sides. But this is what Omar had to say about him. The Dolphins have been rotating swing tackles every day, having one player man the starting left tackle spot and the other serving as the backup right tackle. And Lamb has been the top performer in the match. The 7-year veteran has good feet and anchors well in pass protection. He's the Miami Dolphins' 6th best offensive lineman based on my assessment, and it will be interesting to see how he performs in joint practices and the preseason games. big time that he made this list. The fact that the Dolphins have good depth at the position, I'm interested to see how the offensive line does too. There's a lot of interesting players, including Isaiah Wynn, who I'm really excited to see play, because I think he was a big deal, and obviously Austin Jackson. That's a big deal, and the fact that he's playing that well and on a very talented roster, and I think a lot of people have been standing out in camp so far. The fact that he even made this top 10, I think, is a big deal. And it's very important. We need the offensive line to play better. They need to play more physical. They need to add another dimension to the offense and not just be one-sided like it was last year. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to seeing the most out of anything this training camp and preseason for sure. I'm excited to see what they do in the joint practices as well. It's about time this offensive line play at a higher level than they have in the past. I think the fans deserve it, and we haven't seen good offensive line play in almost 10 seasons, which is really concerning. The best offensive lines in the last 15 seasons or 15 years is 2011 and 2016. Those were the best offensive lines that we've had, and we haven't really been able to replicate those seasons since then. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. One more thing I want to bring up that I did not bring up. Jalen Ramsey was spotted without crutches. Now, you can take that with what you will. I don't know what that means. Mike McDaniel also said in a press conference that he not expects, but he could see I think he said he could see Jalen Ramsey returning earlier than expected. And if someone saw him the fact that he was without crutches is a big deal. And the December report was only reported from one person, and that was a day before he had, almost like an hour or two after he hurt his meniscus. Ian Rappaport said that he won't be back till December. That has been referenced and kind of peddled around as gospel. I don't know if that's true, because it's like, how would he even know that? And there have been other reports conflicting that report. So I don't know. I don't think anybody knows when he's coming back. And hopefully it's sooner than December. Because not that the season's going to fall apart without him, but it's the fact that I just wanted to see him play in this defense. Like, I was so excited to see Jalen Ramsey in a Dolphins uniform. And that's the thing it just bums me out. Like, even thinking about it right now. It's like, dang, man, we couldn't have him week 1. It is what it is. But the Dolphins have a phenomenal defense, and they have a phenomenal person running it. So I'm excited to see them play week 1. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one.